Welcome to Things You Don't Know. Name a substance critical to human survival that continues to play a very important role in health and happiness. No, I'm not talking about water. This episode is about salt. Salt, which is chemically known as sodium chloride, has been central to human civilization for thousands of years. It's valued for its role in food preservation, flavoring, and also plays a significant role in religious and cultural ceremonies and has a real part in superstition too. Salt has influenced trade routes and economies and even helped shape political power. So we'll examine the history of salt and several superstitions and religious applications.
Humans first encountered salt from natural sources such as sea salt deposits, which were left behind by evaporated bodies of seawater, salt springs, and mineral deposits in caves. Salt's preservative qualities were quickly recognized. It kept meat and fish from spoiling, allowing people to store and trade food over long distances. Ancient civilizations in China, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley all valued salt highly. Many of these societies extracted salt through evaporation ponds, salt wells, or mining. Salt, which was essential yet relatively difficult to obtain in some regions, sometimes even served as currency or tribute.
In Egypt, salt played a key role in mummification. Salt was used in religious offerings and rites throughout the ancient world. Its purity and preservative power were often symbolic. In many cultures, sharing salt, quote unquote, became a gesture of hospitality and friendship. The Romans built roads specifically to transport salt from coastal salt pans to inland cities. The Via Salaria, the salt road, is a notable example. Salt rations were important for soldiers, Roman soldiers in particular. And while the idea that soldiers were paid in salt, salary, is debated, the root of the word salary does come from the Latin word sal, meaning salt, but there's not a clear, definitive record that they were paid in salt.
Salt was vital for preserving meat and fish in medieval Europe, making it strategically important during wars and famines. Powerful cities and states like Venice and Genoa grew wealthy, controlling the salt trade routes. Overland salt routes connected key mining regions such as Salzburg's salt mines, literally a salt fortress, to wider markets. Salt often became a government monopoly to secure revenue. For example, in parts of Europe, only authorized agents could sell salt. Heavy taxes, the gabelle in France, caused public discontent and contributed to social and political uprisings. During the age of exploration between the 15th and 17th centuries, European powers sought sea routes and colonies to secure natural resources, especially salt. Coastal colonies with salt works became integral in supporting long sea ocean voyages, as salt and fish and meat were staples for sailors. In Africa, caravans carried salt across the Sahara Desert from salt-rich regions to Haza in modern-day Mali, to mention one, to trade for gold and other goods throughout North and Western Africa. Salt cakes or slabs also served as a form of currency.
Yeah, that's almost kind of hard to imagine, isn't it, Dr. Deneen?
It certainly is.
But it was really important for these people. Now, salt's importance for food preservation continued in the New World. Coastal salt works and salt mines were developed in North and South America to meet demand. Salt smuggling and taxation disputes were frequent. For instance, the British taxed salt to fund imperial activities, sparking resentment amongst colonists. The Industrial Revolution of the 18th and 19th centuries brought new technologies for mining and evaporating salt, reducing its cost and increasing availability. Governments continued to levy taxes on salt, but cheaper production gradually ended many salt monopolies. One of the most famous acts of civil disobedience in modern history, Mahatma Gandhi's Salt March in 1930, protested Britain's salt tax in colonial India. This nonviolent action became a catalyst in India's independence movement. In other parts of the world, salt taxes and monopolies were dismantled as they became politically and economically untenable.
Gandhi's chief lieutenant in that salt march was Subhas Bose. See our Political Deals with the Devil podcast to learn more about him. Today, salt is among the cheapest and most ubiquitous commodities. Modern infrastructure allows vast amounts to be mined or produced from seawater. High-grade salt is essential in the chemical industry, helping to produce plastics, paper, textiles, and dyes, as well as many more products. Salt remains a cornerstone of global cuisine. Different types, such as Himalayan pink salt, fleur de sel, and kosher salt, have distinct textures and different flavors. Excess salt intake is now recognized as a health concern linked to high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease, prompting debates over dietary recommendations and regulations.
You mentioned that high grade salt being essential in the chemical industry, like helping in producing plastics, paper, textiles, dyes, and a whole lot of other things. We never think about that, do we?
No, we don't, but it's one of its hidden values.
It really is. It's very salt is ubiquitous in more things than just eating and preserving things. So, you know, in that same vein, it's very interesting and important to concerning salt that saltiness is one of the five basic tastes for humans. There are several others, but salt, salt.
Yes, indeed, Dr. Weaver. I recall the discussion you and I had concerning salt and the latest addition to the list of human tastes. I'm talking about umami or savoriness, which officially became accepted in 1985 and was recognized at an international umami conference that took place that year in Hawaii.
Yeah, salt does have taste receptors on the tongue, um, more likely in the back of the tongue and in the throat and the roof of the mouth too. They did actually find receptors for that. It's very interesting, and we could spend a lot of time on the biology of that, but we won't. I think this is very significant. and interesting. And perhaps we can cover the topic of tastes and other senses in the future. For now, let's move on and focus on superstitions and religious mentions concerning salt. There are many that are common knowledge and some that I had not really heard anything about. One of the most famous Western superstitions is the belief that spilling salt brings bad luck. This idea has been popularized in part by artwork such as Leonardo da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper, where Judas is depicted knocking over a salt shaker. A common remedy for spilled salt is to toss a pinch of it over the left shoulder, symbolically warding off misfortune or evil spirits that might lurk behind. I remember as a child spilling some salt and being scolded and told to throw a little pinch of salt over my left shoulder. When I asked why, I was told that, well, wasting salt's a bad idea as it was so useful. And then I said, well, but so if I shouldn't waste salt, why should I throw another pinch over my shoulder? And I was told, oh, it's just a custom. It doesn't really matter. Well, none of that made any sense to me then, nor now.
I know what you mean. I was surprised that that has universal applications. In many folk traditions, people around the world believe that scattering salt at a doorway or around the perimeter of a home keeps harmful spirits or negative energies at bay. Some cultures place salt under pillows or in pockets to ward off the evil eye and protect against negative energies or nightmares. In several Eastern European countries like Poland, Russia, and Ukraine, presenting guests with bread and salt is a sign of respect and hospitality. The salt is believed to guard against bad luck while symbolizing friendship and a very warm welcome. During World War II, for example, many Russian people welcomed the Nazis thinking they were being liberated from the Soviet Union with bread and salt. Tragic.
Yeah, indeed. And now we have a whole nother conflict going. Uh, Seems like we can't ever just kind of learn to get along and work things out, huh?
Human beings are stupid that way.
Aren't we, though? Salt is a key ingredient in Jewish practice, especially at the Shabbat table. At the beginning of the meal, bread is dipped or sprinkled with salt. This practice is often linked to ancient temple offerings where salt was included with sacrifices. Symbolically, salt can represent the covenant between God and the Jewish people, referencing scriptural passages that mention the salt of the covenant.
In the Bible, salt appears in several passages. Perhaps the most famous is in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus Christ refers to his followers as the salt of the earth, implying they should preserve their goodness and moral integrity in a fallen world. The idea of a covenant of salt mentioned in the book of Second Chronicles, chapter 13, verse 5, that signifies a binding, enduring commitment. In some Christian traditions, particularly in the Catholic and Orthodox churches, salt may be used in exorcisms or in blessings, highlighting its symbolic power to both purify and protect. In the famous biblical narrative, Genesis chapter 19, Lot's wife is famously turned into a pillar of salt when she looks back at the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. While the story itself is very brief, numerous religions and cultural interpretations have attached deep significance to this event. Below are some key points and perspectives. Angels warn Lot's family to flee the city and not look back. Genesis 19:17. Lot's wife, however, does look back, suggesting a disregard for or doubt in the divine instructions. Her transformation into salt underscores the severity of disobedience. In biblical literature, a direct violation of God's command often results in swift and dramatic repercussions. Adam and Eve's exile from Eden, Nadab and Abihu's fate for drinking in the tabernacle in Leviticus 10. The pillar of salt stands as a memorial or a cautionary sign against turning away from God's instructions, demonstrating a lack of faith and yearning for a sinful past. One other interpretation sees Lot's wife looking back, as I said, out of regret or nostalgia for the life she left behind in Sodom. Her punishment can symbolize the spiritual cost of clinging to old ways and the destructive power of moral corruption. The story serves as a reminder that salvation or deliverance from sin, vice, or spiritually harmful circumstances of any kind sometimes requires a decisive break with the past.
While not as central in Islamic ritual as in some other faiths, salt is viewed positively in many Muslim cultures. It's sometimes used to ward off envy, quote, the evil eye, for instance, by placing salt near an entrance or adding salt in certain charms. In some folk practices, though not formally part of Islamic doctrine, people scatter salt to keep away jinn or negative energies. Salt symbolizes purification in several Hindu rituals. During certain puja ceremonies, it may be used alongside water, rice, or other elements that represent fertility, prosperity, and purity. Some Hindus use saltwater baths as a form of spiritual cleansing, believed to purify the aura and remove negative influences. I'm wondering, Dr. Denis, I know that you have some contact with some monks that live near you. Have you ever heard any them talk about anything like that?
Yes, these are Jainist monks, and in their tradition, salt is a symbol of the ultimate goal of human life, which is to transcend physicality and become a fly. So they often use salt to welcome people, bless children, or anoint bodies at death in hopes that the noble soul will become a fly.
Wow.
Now, in Japanese culture, which is influenced by both Buddhist and Shinto thoughts and practices, salt is used ceremoniously at funerals and in front of homes. Bowls, bowls of salt are placed outside the house after a funeral to ward off any malevolent spirits that might have followed the mourners. Salt can also represent the purification of spaces, ensuring that negative or restless spirits do not linger. The Japanese indigenous spiritual tradition, Shinto, involves many purification rites. For example, piles of salt are placed outside businesses, restaurants, and homes to invite good fortune and repel all forms of negativity. The famous sport of sumo wrestling, which is strongly tied to Shinto ritual, features wrestlers tossing salt into the ring before a match to purify the space. A champion of sumo, known as a yokozuna, is often bathed in salt before they defend their title.
Wow. It's really kind of surprising when you think about all the different things that people use salt for and how they use it. And how it has been imbued with certain mystical qualities
I
and
have to
such.
admit, I was totally surprised when we started looking into it. I have always enjoyed salt on food, but other than that, there's so much more to it than that.
Well, yeah, I remember. I remember when I suggested it, this topic, and you kind of went, well, okay, that might be interesting, and I could tell from the sound of your voice that you were thinking, salt, come on, I got all the salt I need in a salt shaker right here. What else is there?
I have got to stop second guessing you because you are invariably proved right.
Hey, this was a spitball thing, and I had no idea that it was this that there was as much information, more information than what we can even put on in this podcast here. You know, salt's preservation qualities have led many religions and cultures to regard it as a symbol of incorruptibility and endurance. Because it prevents decay, salt can stand for divine protection against a spiritual decay or moral degradation. Salt's ability to cleanse or ward off bacteria physically often mirrors its spiritual role of banishing impurity or other evil forces. Religious or folk rituals that sprinkle or circle salt aim for metaphysical purification of space or individuals. In several cultures, sharing salt or making an agreement with salt signifies loyalty, truthfulness, and perhaps an unbreakable bond. This motif appears across the Middle East and parts of Asia. Though scientifically, we know salt to be a mineral with preservative and flavor enhancing qualities. People around the globe continue to observe long standing traditions around its supposed protective and purifying powers. In modern spiritual or New Age practices, taking salt baths, which I can't imagine doing that, bathing in salt. Can you, Dr. Deneen?
I would probably get stuck in a blessed tub because of it.
I got it.
I'm a somewhat large person, folks, so I wouldn't want anybody the Herculean task of getting me out of a tub full of salt.
Indeed. The other practices like creating salt circles or smudging with salt laced cleansing sprays has become popular. These practices blend older folk beliefs with contemporary holistic wellness approaches. It's not quite to the level of having these things where you have a vial and your hand goes up and down because of the stuff that's inside of a glass vial, which has no way of getting to your skin or whatever. But almost to that extent.
Well, I know, for example, my Sangoma, my African folk healer friends, use a great deal of salt in their rituals, including sacrificing meat, which they then bring into a communal festival. Now, in the ancient Near East, salt was associated with lifelessness and destruction as much as it was with purification and preservation. Cities or lands sown with salt, as during the wars between Rome and Carthage, were considered cursed or rendered barren, as in the book of Judges in the Bible, chapter 9, verse 45. Within this cultural framework, a pillar of salt can represent a monument to barrenness and destruction. It also visually aligns with the mineral formations found in the region near the Dead Sea, known for its extremely high salt content.
Have you seen pictures of that?
I have. It is stunning.
And you've got to wonder. I mean, that is one of the more bizarre things. If you haven't, if our listeners haven't seen that, I would check it out if I were you, just for curiosity's sake. And yes, there are scientific explanations for it, but hey, before we had the ability to kind of look into some of those things, if you can just imagine, people might look at those things and say, well, these are people that were turned to salt. In summary, Lot's wife being turned into a pillar of salt is a multivalent symbol in the biblical tradition. It conveys themes of obedience, faith, moral resolve, and the irreversible consequence of yearning for a corrupted way of life. Over centuries, it has served as a dramatic reminder that true salvation or repentance often demands an unflinching move forward away from the places and habits that threatens one's spiritual well-being.
I must say, I have a bit of a personal connection with this story. I think it's best understood as a commentary on trusting in the possibility of the future. One of my greatest flaws, I'll admit it quite openly, friends, as I'm a person that struggles with change, and I sometimes cling to a romanticized view of the past, this story is a good corrective. It is a reminder to at least attempt to boldly move forward towards a brighter, self directed future. While there's no guarantee of success, to remain in comfortable retrogression is not in accord with the better angels of our nature.
Well, that's true. Progress means change. Getting better means change. Doing things better means change. All of these things are true. Well, look, we have covered a lot of ground in this episode, and I hope that we've raised some interesting points for our listeners. I found out things that I really wasn't that aware of. Again, I would encourage people to look beyond the surface of everyday things. Just because you something is around you all the time doesn't mean you should just take it for granted, because the history and connections of even the most common items can reveal a lot of interesting things. Hey, stay curious, check things out. Don't take the word of anyone. Look for yourself, think for yourself, puzzle it out, get the facts. Now, I'm thinking about actually doing a fact checking kind of podcast here in the future. Uh, and if you have any thoughts about whether that would be interesting to you, I'd love to hear from you on that, because there's a lot of things I think that are happening and have happened over time and continue to happen, where just checking out the facts can reveal a lot. So, anyhow, thanks for listening. And please join us again soon. And as I like to say, TTFN, or ta ta for now, or hey, catch you later. Bye for now.
Please give us a like, comment. We truly enjoy making these podcasts, and I hope this one has been interesting for you, as Dr. Weaver said. And I want to echo his sentiments. Look look at things for yourself. Reason them out. It will make you a stronger and more broad-minded person.
Indeed, don't take our word or anyone else's word alone. Check it out. Right, Dr. Dean?
Absolutely. So long for now, folks.